Isang mapagpalang araw sa iyo kapatid. Samahan mo akong muli sa isang refleksyon. And I entitled this reflection as Life Live in Right Relationship with Others. No? And that is, I think, the very nature of life. To live in right relationship with others. And that is found in Matthew chapter 5, verse 21 through verse 37. Right? The teachings of Jesus about anger. The teaching of Jesus about adultery, divorce, and even that of vows. Paano ipinakita, itinuro ng ating Panginoong Yesus ang mga mahalagang bagay before His audience.
Do you want to know?
So in the early part of the 5th chapter of Matthew's account, Jesus has commenced one of his major tutelage that perhaps redefine and reorient the ancient conventional interpretation of their sacred law into a contemporary understanding from the point of view of this historical ordinary Jewish citizen in the person of Jesus. Kung paanong binigyan niya ng kakaibang interpretasyon na hindi sang-ayon doon sa interpretasyon ng mga tagapagturo ng kautusan. Right? He begins his teachings by the reversal of what had been considered as mundane happiness in contrast with the definition or with this definition of blessedness. Isang ako na natin na santo na surat in the introductory part of his teaching in chapter 5, may papan kaday di kinagasat. Isang aminay sa maysa ni Apo tayong Jesucristo, may papan ti panursuro na ti kinagasat. Nga nagpaiduma kaday di panursuro, ti kinagasat sigon ti pamantayan, ulit sigon ti panirigan, dagiti tattao kan panursuro uripay dagiti agsursuro wano may maestro itilinteg. So he establishes a different articulation of the law while maintaining its effect in social religious landscape. No? He did neither establish a new set of laws nor negate the established religious codes of conduct, but he came to fulfill it in a different, unique application that exceeds the way it has been observed and interpreted by the religious authorities in the ancient Palestinian civilization. Kung ganitong iniinterpreta, ganito ang kanilang pagkaintindi, ito naman yung interpretasyon sang-ayon doon sa pamantayan at sang-ayon doon sa pagkaunawa at sang-ayon doon sa katuruan at turo ng ating Panginoong Hesus. Right? He did not rely upon the interpretation of the religious leaders like that of the scribes, the Pharisees, and the Sadducees, but he defines or redefines and reframes their interpretation with a more theistic and ethical considerations na magkaiba at kakaiba doon sa pamantayan at katuruan sang-ayon sa mga tagapagturo ng kautusan. He begins his argument with these words. Ano ba ang sinasabi ng ating Panginoong Hesus? Sang-ayon doon sa verse 21 hanggang 37. Nung makita tayo, it's like a liturgical in nature kasi sabi niya, nangaganyo na isao kadagiti tattao idi ununa. And that is part of his statement, right? Preliminary statement. And then, he put his own unique interpretation with this phrase. Ngam ita ibagak kada kayo. So ako na nangaganyo idi ununa. Ana isuro kada kayo. Uno, nangaganyo ana isao kadagiti tattao idi ununa. And then isaruno ni Apo tayong Jesucristo ngam ita ibagak kada kayo. Right? Indeed, Jesus did not abolish the law and the teachings of the prophets. And that's what he reminded to his audience in verse 17. Wala ni Apo tayong Jesucristo, I did not come to abolish the law and the prophets, but I did come to fulfill it. He came to fulfill it. Fulfillment that exists beyond the teachings and observances of the religious leaders of his time relative to the application in their ongoing everyday life. Parang may nakikita siyang hindi sang-ayon doon sa kanilang tinuturo at ginagawa ng mga religious leaders. And so his interpretation challenges the righteousness set by the religious leaders. So perhaps there is no congruency of their interpretation and the application of their teachings. This is the very reason why Jesus instructed his audience to exceed beyond the righteousness of the teachers of the law. Di lamang sila nakikinig, wano aramiden, kastar aramiden, dagiti agisursuro, wano manursuro itilinteg. Nga day sursuro da, kat saan mat nga umandatop kaday jay aramiden da. Right? The praise, but now I tell you, so ako na ni Apo Jesus, itngam ita, ibagak kada kayo. It expresses a new interpretation that proceeds from the same point of reference or sacred document, just as how the leading religious leaders draw their interpretation to the same ancient document in their contemporary world. May sa ti pagtaudan ti panursuro, but they have their own interpretation or articulation regarding one sacred document. No? He redefines the interpretation of the past and employed a new lens that reverses the tutelage of these religious leaders. This include anger, adultery, divorce, and teachings about vows. Ano ba ang kakaiba doon sa turo ng ating Panginoong Jesus na hindi sang-ayon doon sa kung paanong itinuturo ng mga religious leaders ang mga bagay na iyan o yung mga una na nilang narinig. So nga kuna ni Apo tayong Jesucristo nang ganyo ang naisao kadagiti tattao di ununa. Sanang to isaron nga ako na nang ita ibagak kada kayo. Right? The proactive element and dynamics of his teachings made him unique from the religious leaders or religious interpreters of their sacred law. His teachings contain a controlling element rather than responding to it after it has happened. It is a preventive measure rather than employing strategies after situation comes into its inevitable consummation. So prior to the commencement and consequently severity of circumstances, proactive initiatives remain an essential element. So bago pa man mangyari yan, meron ka nang gagawin na danti maipadagip kanya mga masapol nga aramidam sakbay pay nga may isang makait dayta uno sakbay pay ang mapasamak dayta sakbay pay nga maaramid dayta sakbay pay ang makipagpaset ka iti dayta. So rather than responding to it after it has happened, bago ba mapangyari, mayroon ka nang dapat gawin upang hindi na tuluyang mangyari ang mga bagay na iyan. So the interpretation from the lens of Jesus through his preliminary statement, but now I tell you, and followed consequently by his own proposition negating the conventional interpretation of the religious leaders, expresses the importance of relationship. Kaya nga napakahalaga sa turo ng ating Panginoong Jesus o sa turo ni Jesus ang kahalagahan ng relasyon, ang kahalagahan ng magandang ugnayan natin sa Diyos na inaipapakita din naman sa magandang ugnayan natin sa ating kapwa. But in this particular biblical passage in verse 31 through verse 37, pinapakita at itinuturo ng ating Panginoong Jesus ang magandasan ng ugnayan ng tao sa kanyang kapwa-tao. Kaya nga sabi ko, I entitled these reflections as Life Lived in Right Relationship with Others. So rather than causing the severity of a particular circumstance due to disagreements and conflicting confessions, his teachings about anger, divorce, adultery, and vows lead to the preservation of healthy relationship. Daytoy ti mangiturong, ti mas nasaysaya at kuma, apan nakairilasyon iti pada a tao, rather than its breakage due to unresolved conflicts and broken promises. Jesus desires to nurture and preserve human relationships at its best. But more than human relationships is, of course, the preservation of life or human life and that of human dignity. Since human life is lived in relationship with others, this relationship should not be detrimental to human life. Yun sana ang relasyon na nagbibigay buhay. At yung buhay na naiugnay sa magandang ugnayan sa Diyos at sa kapwa. However, God is not just after the restoration of broken relationships in the world. While it's true, it is the intention of God to restore our broken relationship with Him. But in this biblical passage, He is not just after the restoration of broken relationships in the world. No, it's not. Hindi lamang iyon, kundi bago pa man mapangyari ang bagay na iyan, dapat meron na tayong ginagawa sapagkat meron nang ginawa ang ating Panginoon. In fact, He is after the preservation of life, live in and characterized by healthy relationship with others in the world. So He's not just after the restoration of broken relationship, but He is after the preservation of life, lived in and characterized by healthy and right relationship with others in the world. This is a call to live a life in right and healthy relationship with God. That is translated into a right and healthy relationship with others in this same world. Muli, isang mapagpalang araw sa iyo, kapatid, at pagpalain ka nawa ng ating Panginoon.